The news out of Detroit has sent shockwaves through America's Hmong and Laotian communities. 16 immigrants, many who've called America home for decades, were arrested by Immigration and Customs Enforcement on July 30th and now face deportation. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed these arrests, but this isn't just another immigration story. These aren't random deportations. We're talking about people whose families risked everything to help America win a war most Americans have never even heard of. To understand why this matters, we need to go back to the 1960s, to a conflict that would become known as the Secret War. From 1961 to 1975, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency actively recruited Hmong men and boys to fight a covert war in Laos, directly violating the Geneva Accords. The CIA-organized group of Hmong tribesmen became known as the Secret Army, and their participation would grow into the largest paramilitary operation the CIA had ever undertaken. The scale of this operation was staggering. Laos became the most intensely bombed country in the history of warfare. More bombs were dropped in the Plain of Jars region than anywhere else in the world. Before the war started, more than 50,000 people lived there, many belonging to the Hmong tribe. Their peaceful mountain life was about to be shattered forever. But why did the CIA turn to these mountain people? After President John F. Kennedy took office, he refused to send more American soldiers to Southeast Asia. Instead, he called on the CIA to use tribal forces in Laos and launch guerrilla operations in North Vietnam with Asian recruits. Under this directive, General Vang Pao, who served the Royal Lao family, recruited and trained his Hmong and Mien soldiers to become America's secret army. This alliance was particularly advantageous for the CIA. The Hmong had intimate knowledge of the region and could navigate the difficult mountain terrain. As familial clans, the CIA could negotiate directly with Hmong leaders, rather than dealing with a political nation, allowing them to avoid formal diplomatic obligations. It's estimated that the CIA recruited and trained around 30,000 soldiers, mostly Hmong, but also including Mien, Khmu, and Lahu, to support the war effort. These weren't professional soldiers. Boys as young as 11 years old served as foot soldiers to fight the communists in Laos and Vietnam. In return, the Hmong received rice and humanitarian aid. They performed the roles that U.S. soldiers would have done if they'd been sent to Laos. They rescued American fighter pilots who were shot down, searched for downed aircraft, and gathered intelligence behind enemy lines. General Vang Pao became a legend among his people. He climbed the ranks to become a major general, the highest rank ever achieved by a Hmong person in the Royal Lao Army. The CIA director in the mid-1970s, William Colby, called him the biggest hero of the Vietnam War. Many Hmong people believed that General Vang Pao had descended from the heavens to lead them. But when America withdrew from Southeast Asia in 1975, the Hmong were abandoned to face the consequences alone. One survivor recalled, when the war was over and the American CIA was withdrawn from Laos, the communists took over and they said we, the Hmong people, were the hands, eyes, and ears of the American CIA. They killed mostly men and young boys. It was very difficult for us to live there. After 1975, we moved to the jungle to hide. We fought until 1978 without anyone's support. We lost our village, and my family with other families, about 3,000 people, walked and fought our way to Thailand. The aftermath was devastating. After the communist takeover in Laos, up to 300,000 people fled to neighboring Thailand. The Hmong were persecuted as traitors and lackeys of the Americans, with the government and its Vietnamese allies carrying out human rights abuses against Hmong civilians. Tens of thousands were killed during the war, and even more lost their lives attempting to escape to freedom after the war ended. Thousands of Hmong and Laotian refugees eventually made it to America. They came as legal refugees in the 1970s and 1980s, admitted because of their service to the United States. After the fall of Saigon and Laos 50 years ago, many found homes in Midwestern states like Michigan, building new lives in places such as Detroit, Macomb County, and the Lansing area. Now, fast forward to July 30th, 2025. 15 of the refugees had received letters asking them to appear at the ICE field office in Detroit. Many believed they were being called in for a routine appointment. These appointments had been routine before, but that day they were arrested. The arrests were completely unexpected. Among those detained is Liu Yang, a 47-year-old Hmong immigrant who came to the United States legally as an infant. As a young adult in 1997, Yang was arrested on a home invasion charge, ultimately taking a plea deal and serving 10 months. The conviction has since complicated his immigration status. But here's what makes his case extraordinary. Yang served his time and became a pillar of the community after his release. The state of Michigan had his Con v. action expunged. Yang's wife, An Vu, spoke at a press conference saying that deporting him would not only turn a respected community leader into a political casualty, but would be a grave and irreversible injustice. Vu said she and her family fear the worst for Yang if he's deported to Laos due to his active involvement in Michigan's Hmong community and his family's past work with the U.S. military. ICE's justification appears straightforward. The agency states this operation resulted in the arrest of multiple criminal illegal aliens, including child sex abusers, drug traffickers, a known gang member who obstructed a murder investigation, and other Laotian nationals with extensive criminal histories. ICE officials say the detainees had criminal records and had been ordered removed by migration judges over the course of years. They added that the agency was now taking action because it had obtained travel documents from the government of Laos. Currently, federal immigration authorities are working to rebuild their enforcement capabilities.
Well, it took almost 5 agents to make that arrest when we could have just went inside the facility and took that, child sex offender into custody. They didn't cooperate with the detainer. And that's just one example of if ICE agents weren't available out front to take that individual into custody, you would have had another child sex offender go back into the community in Rhode Island. And that is what we're up against every day in these sanctuary jurisdictions. These aren't the individuals you want in your neighborhood or at the playground.
The Trump administration has been pressuring countries like Laos into accepting deportees. Laos doesn't have a formal repatriation agreement with the United States and historically rarely issued travel documents for deportation. But in June 2025, the U.S. placed a partial travel ban on Laos and cut off visas for certain Lao individuals, citing visa overstays and failure to cooperate with U.S. deportation policy. The Lao government has been issuing travel documents in response to these pressures. The numbers are staggering. There are over 4,800 people considered by ICE to be nationals of Laos who have removal orders and are living in the United States. Moa Her, consular officer at the Lao Embassy in Washington, said the embassy has issued travel documents for 145 U.S. deportees to be accepted in Laos since the beginning of the year. Historically, the embassy accepted about 10 deportees annually. Meanwhile, communities are responding with their own forms of resistance.
You were alerted that ICE was outside an elementary school in Roosevelt. What did you hear? What did you do next?
Yeah, I simply reshared a post from a community organization that ICE had been spotted lurking outside schools. I think it's just horrible because children should be able to go to school without fear they're going to be separated from their parents. That is speech that is 100% protected by the First Amendment.
Yeah, and that gets into, Senate President Warren Peterson is saying he's calling for a federal investigation into your activities, saying that you're getting in the way of these agents carrying out their duties. What do you say to that?
It's absolutely ridiculous and a politically motivated attack. It's an escalation of their willingness to weaponize the courts to go after political opponents. Arizonans should be able to know what is happening in our communities and how federal agents are acting on our behalf.
Yeah. And what do you say to folks who push back and they'd say, well, look, these are agents, they're carrying out the job that they were hired to do. And they should be able to carry out those duties without people getting in their way.
I am not condoning violence in any way or obstruction in any way. This is simply about giving the community information about things that they can see when they're driving down the street and seeing that there are masked men jumping out of vehicles, armed and violating the Constitution. Look, these agents are under extreme pressure to meet quotas, and that has led to mistakes, including detentions of United States citizens and lawful permanent residents. It is incredibly important that we know what is going on and who even knows if these masked men are there on behalf of the federal government?
The human impact is devastating. In one case, a father was taken away by plainclothes officers, forcing him to leave his 3 young children unsupervised. One community member described how ICE came into a house and took a husband while the children watched, traumatized. Another wife, Maia Xiong of Pontiac, whose husband and Wa Konglor was detained, said, "This appeared to be a targeted operation, an easy way for ICE officers to detain people without going to their homes. My husband, like many others that day, was taken without warning." Michigan State Representative Mai Xiong, herself a Hmong refugee and Michigan's first Hmong American legislator, is leading the fight back. 27 Michigan lawmakers have called for the detainees to be immediately released in a letter to the ICE Detroit field director. Representative Xiong noted that many of the detainees had never been to Laos, having been born in refugee camps in other countries. Xiong's criticism is pointed. Instead of our federal leaders focusing on policy changes to reform the immigration system, they are throwing billions of dollars into hiring more ICE officers while providing sign-on bonuses to snatch people. We are going to see more detainments, more deportations. If you are not upset, you should be. This is part of a broader enforcement operation unlike anything in modern American history.
The ultimatum is simple, brutal, and unprecedented in its scope. Leave voluntarily or face detention and deportation. But here's what nobody saw coming. This is not just another campaign promise. This is happening right now, and the machinery behind it is more complex and far-reaching than anyone imagined. August 9th, 2025, marked a turning point that immigration attorneys are calling the most aggressive enforcement action in modern American history. Sources within the Department of Homeland Security suggest that what we are witnessing is not just policy enforcement, it is a complete transformation of how America handles immigration. The question everyone is asking is not whether this will change the country, but how dramatically and how fast.
Immigration enforcement has received unprecedented funding, with ICE becoming the largest federal law enforcement agency in United States history.
$46 billion. That is how much cash Trump just funneled into the largest deportation machine in American history. According to CNN, ICE just received what experts are calling a historic windfall of enforcement money. But here is the shocking part. NBC News reported that despite arresting the most people in 5 years, deportations are still lagging behind Trump's promises. The American Immigration Council revealed something even more stunning. This budget makes ICE the single largest federal law enforcement agency in the history of the nation. We are talking about more than $170 billion.
New detention facilities are being opened across the country.
And it's expected to house up to 1,000 detainees when it officially opens next week. According to ICE, they've already started to accept a small number of detainees in preparation for the ramp-up next week. Today, Cornyn did not go inside the new facility. He only examined it from the outside. And he said, importantly here, that this facility will not house children or families. He said it will be exclusively single adult men and women. And he said these are people who have pending deportation orders and have already exhausted every other legal option.
Immigrants from Detroit were initially taken to an ICE detention center at North Lake Correctional Facility in northwestern Michigan, several hours away. They're now at detention centers in Louisiana and Texas facing imminent deportation. The North Lake facility, an 1,800-bed private facility operated by GEO Group, is considered the largest ICE detention center in the Midwest. If operated at full capacity, the facility is poised to generate $70 million a year in profits. Across the nation, protests erupting in cities across America reflect growing unease with these enforcement actions.
Hundreds took off from Olvera Street in downtown LA, marching toward the federal detention center with a clear message for ICE.
Stop terrorizing our community! Regardless of your color, we deserve due process. Our rights are being violated, and we need to stop it with this. Our people are getting kidnapped. Anybody with a mask can come right now as we're doing this interview and take you. Your family won't know where you're at.
Most of those targeted were born in refugee camps and came to the United States as children in the aftermath of the Secret War. The Michigan Immigration Rights Center, the Asian Law Caucus, and other organizations sent a letter to ICE urging the agency not to deport these individuals since they're not in the U.S. illegally and could face persecution for having aided the U.S. government. Advocates argue this represents a fundamental betrayal of America's promises. As one advocate stated, they have already taken accountability as directed by the U.S. justice system, and they have turned their lives around to become contributing members of our community. So, for these cases, deportations are especially a cruel form of double punishment. The timing of these deportations is particularly significant. ICE arrests are up dramatically since President Trump took office. In the first 5 months of the Trump administration, Immigration and Customs Enforcement made 732 arrests in Minnesota alone, nearly equal to the total in 2024. The arrests have raised alarm in the Hmong community, which historically has been spared from such deportations. Some members of the Twin Cities Hmong community, at 80,000 the largest urban Hmong population in the country, see the deportations in a more nuanced way. But this isn't just about immigration policy, it's about America's historical obligations. Federal authorities need to consider the historical context and unique circumstances of Hmong and Laotian immigrants before deporting them to a country their families fled. As one community leader said, it's cruel, it's wrong, it's unjust, and it must end. We are calling for their release. Families belong together, not torn apart in secrecy. We also call for transparency and accountability so these horrific events stop happening. Deportation doesn't just impact one person, it tears at the fabric of entire communities. We're talking about small businesses losing a valued employee, elders losing caregivers, children losing a parent or grandparent. The legal complexity of these cases reveals deeper problems with America's immigration system. Ann View, a U.S. citizen, said past attempts to sponsor her husband for a green card were rejected, but she noted he's never been considered a resident of Laos or Thailand either. Both countries have rejected him over and over, she said. Liu is stateless. If forced to return, he will face danger. What makes this story so powerful is how it connects America's foreign policy decisions to real families today. The secret war in Laos was the largest paramilitary operation ever undertaken by the CIA. It came out of the war with devastating casualties among the tribesmen and boys who made up the Americans' principal fighting force. They came out of the war with their land and way of life irretrievably lost. It's hard to imagine how anyone could think of Laos as a victory, but apparently that's what it is in the CIA's institutional memory. In former agency director Richard Helms's memoir, the chapter on Laos is titled "The War We Won." But for the Hmong and Laotian families facing deportation today, this doesn't feel like victory. It feels like abandonment. The goal of the secret war served American purposes, not theirs. The Lao were expendable. By contrast, it's harder to find anything morally defensible in American actions in Laos and Cambodia. U.S. operations in those countries, including among the heaviest bombing in military history, were conducted to support American objectives in Vietnam, rather than for any achievable benefit for its smaller, weaker neighbors. The community response has been swift and emotional. One detained man's wife said, "He is the backbone of my family. He is the source of strength for over 53 nieces and nephews. Nearly 300 people will be devastated by his deportation." The secret war in Laos ended nearly 50 years ago, but its consequences are playing out in immigration courts and detention centers today. For the Hmong and Laotian communities, this isn't ancient history. It's a living legacy that continues to shape their lives and their fears. As America grapples with immigration policy in 2025, the case of Detroit's 16 detained refugees forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the costs of covert warfare and the price of broken promises. The question isn't just whether these individuals committed crimes decades ago. The question is whether America honors its debts to those who risked everything to serve its interests. The outcome of these deportation cases will send a message far beyond Detroit's Hmong and Laotian communities. It will signal whether America stands by its allies, even when they're no longer useful, or whether the lesson of the secret war is that in America's covert conflicts, everyone is expendable. For now, 16 families wait in detention centers, wondering if the country they've called home for decades will send them back to face the consequences of helping America win a war most Americans never knew was fought. Their fate will test whether America's promises mean anything at all, or whether the secret war's biggest casualty was the trust of those who believed in them.